Good afternoon, everyone. This is Michelle Young, the Executive Director of the University Council for Educational Administration with the UCA webinar series on educational leadership. For the next hour, we are going to be taking a deep dive into the world of leader tracking systems, a growing area focused for both school districts and university preparation partners. In particular, we're going to explore how data gathered through a leader tracking system has the potential to not only positively support informed decisions around recruitment and selection of school leader candidates, but also offer preparation programs data on how their graduates are faring in the workplace. As we'll hear from our guests today, data from leader tracking systems has quite a lot to offer stakeholders at all levels of the principal pipeline. Recently, the Policy Studies Associates, with support from the Wallace Foundation, released a new report entitled Leader Tracking Systems: Turning Data into Information for School Leadership. This report looks at work being conducted around leader tracking systems in 6 of the districts participating in the Wallace Foundation's Principal Pipeline Initiative. These include Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools in North Carolina, Denver Public Schools in Colorado, Gwinnett County Public Schools in Georgia, Hillsborough County Public Schools in Florida, New York City Department of Education, New York, and Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. This study, in which the report is based, explored the unique ways in which each district sought to use leadership tracking systems and the growing realization of the powerful opportunities that are offered by this data. The report offers lessons learned for districts and their university partners who are interested in developing a leader tracking system, concerning strategies used and challenges districts had to overcome in developing the tracking systems, such as restrictions around university district data sharing, and so forth. A copy of the report has been provided in the handout tab of the GoToWebinar portal. Now, before I introduce our guests, I'd like to encourage those of you who are attending to feel free to submit comments or questions for our participants anytime during the webinar. You can do this by typing your thoughts or questions into the question box that's provided by the GoToWebinar platform on your dashboard. We will be monitoring these questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to ensure that each one of your questions gets asked. We are thrilled to have with us today the lead author of the report, along with 2 district project leads joining us today for our webinar. Brenda Turnbull is principal and co-founder of the Policy Studies Associates, the firm that conducts research and evaluation in education and youth development. In addition to the leader tracking system research, Brenda has led studies on initiatives for equity, innovation, and research-based school improvements, and leads the evaluation of the Principal Pipeline Initiative for the Wallace Foundation. Also joining us today is Damaris Blondin, who serves as the project manager for the Prince George's County Public Schools Wallace Foundation grants within the District Office of Talent Development. Part of her work involves developing strategies for sustaining and scaling of Prince George's County's Principal Pipeline and Principal Supervisors initiatives, while also continuing to develop the county's Leadership Center. Finally, we have joining us today Tricia McManus, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Education Leadership in the Hillsborough County Public Schools, where she supports the talent management of leaders, teachers, and instructional support staff. She works collaboratively with other district divisions to ensure the readiness and ongoing effective performance of all staff members. Welcome to today's webinar. We're so delighted to have each of you with us. So to start things off, I thought it would be helpful for Brenda to provide us with an introduction to an overview of the report. We have many questions for you, of course, Brenda, including what lessons were learned by those districts as they developed their leadership tracking systems, and how can this data help school districts improve the probability that a new principal will be ready for success on the job?
Thanks very much, Michelle. I'm really pleased to be with you today. You can see on the slide the cover of the report I'll be talking about, and UCEA has kindly provided the report as a handout, which is terrific. Let's move to the next slide, and I will, in this introduction, I'll just put the leader tracking system in context of the Principal Pipeline Initiative and talk and sort of situate the report for you. First, the LTS in the Principal Pipeline Initiative, as Michelle said, the 6 large districts that participated in the initiative did a lot of work on improving and aligning the structures and systems that they have around developing school leadership in their districts. They worked on standards, principal preparation in partnership with universities and other programs, hiring and placement, and evaluation and support of principals. The way in which the LTS, or leader tracking system, came about actually started under the evaluations auspices. The Wallace Foundation required districts to pull together lots of data about their principals, their aspiring principals, and their schools. Districts worked on this. It was clear that automating the process of compiling and organizing the data was going to be a time saver for everyone down the road. Therefore, Wallace gave them support for the development of the tracking systems and the data dashboards. Next slide shows you what is a leader tracking system. For the moment, pay attention to the right-hand side of the slide. We'll come back to the left-hand side of the slide in a few minutes when we talk about the process of building these things. But what a leader tracking system is, from the user perspective, is a set of web pages, dashboards, and tools for decision makers. It pulls together in a user-friendly format lots of data about aspiring principals, sitting principals, and preparation programs. And for the aspiring and sitting principals, this can be a look at a set of individuals for purposes of making a hiring decision, for example, or it can be an overview picture to help a district in overall succession planning. So that's what a tracking system does. Now, what we did with this report on the next slide, we hoped to show other districts what they could do with well-organized data about leaders and aspiring leaders. We wanted to give a realistic, although not terrifying, sense of what it takes, and to give examples and advice based on hindsight from the districts. It's not an evaluative report. It's not a rigorous comparison of what the districts did. It's examples based on experience that we hope will be helpful to others. Our data sources, just very quickly, were primarily interviews, and this is on the next slide, interviews over the last fall and winter, basically. We also had the opportunity, because we've been evaluating the Pipeline Initiative, to look back at our annual interviews for the previous 4 years, which was terrific. We also used progress reports and presentations by district staff. So let's move on quickly to the findings about using an LTS. We really found that in a number of ways, having an LTS supports a transformed district role around intentionality, really, in staffing their schools with principals. It supports succession planning. It enables districts to see the capabilities of who's in their pipeline in a long-term perspective. Over time, the data pulled together in a leader tracking system can help districts make informed decisions about preparation, placement, and support for leaders. And we're seeing the districts sharing their aggregate information about their leaders and aspiring leaders with their partners, including preparation programs. This matters, this transformed district role matters because, as we see on the next slide, early data from our evaluation indicate that districts got better at placing principals. The matches between principals and schools improved according to surveys of novice principals. We surveyed 5 cohorts of newly placed principals, and from the first 2 cohorts before or right at the very beginning of the initiative to the last 2 cohorts we surveyed, the most recently placed, there were more positive reports about the fit that principals perceived between their capabilities and their schools. And LTS supports this because it allows an apples-to-apples comparison of candidates based on standardized data pulled together in an automated fashion for easy review with really comparable data about all candidates that supports efficiency in the search for possible matches. And pretty much every district it said to us at some point that they wanted to get away from the old boy network, from the power of who you know in hiring, and go to something that was more formal and more fair. Next, an LTS can help in building the bench. In terms of succession planning, districts have benefited from better organized and complete forecasts of their need by school level, elementary, secondary, and so forth, by type of population in the school, and other specialized factors, and data on the capabilities and backgrounds of candidates. For preparation programs, there's the opportunity to learn about how their graduates in the aggregate are doing in their efforts to move into leadership positions, and in their the amount and type of success that they experience as school leaders. At an even earlier stage in the building of an LTS, there's been conversation between the districts and preparation partner programs about the types of competencies that the districts are measuring and what they want to see in their new principals. And that, we've been told, has been beneficial to the preparation programs so that they can align their selection practices and the programming to some extent to district needs and district priorities. Over time, and this hasn't happened yet, but with enough years and enough individuals with data collected and available for analysis, the districts are really hoping that this kind of analysis of the data in the LTS can help strengthen the programs. The questions that are really at the forefront there are the selection criteria the right ones? Is the curriculum on target? Is the clinical experience what it should be? And with enough cases, it's going to be possible to do some analysis of the relationship between any of those choices in preparation and the successes experienced by the participants and graduates on the job. Next, I'm going to talk about findings about building an LTS. I mentioned earlier that our purpose here is really to be helpful in the building of an LTS. And so we'll see again the slide about what's an LTS, repurposed to show you how a district builds a leader tracking system. The key point here is that there are a whole lot of steps. Another key point is that you begin and end always with the user. Who has decisions that could be made better with more data, better organized? Really, what problem are you trying to solve? And I know Damaris and Trish will talk about types of problems that they've been able to address better thanks to their leader tracking systems. What data do you have on hand? we really encourage folks to start with what they have. But looking to the longer term, what data do you want to have? Then what tech infrastructure do you have in place? Again, work with what you have to the extent possible, but build for the future when you can. Then there's a lot of user-friendly design to be done, from specifying the features to designing the user interface and the user experience. And I know we can hear a lot from my colleagues on the panel about the need to just keep testing, just keep making it, just make sure that the dashboards display everything they should, but not too much so that they're not overwhelming and just too cluttered to be user-friendly. And so those steps, I want to emphasize there's a lot of them and they take a long time. So finally, just to summarize the advice that we have for development and rollout of an LTS, start by targeting a purpose that has high priority. Expect a whole lot of work in pinpointing the needs of information users and retrieving the data and cleaning the data, I would add. In the development process, have one primary decision maker. We'll be hearing from the people who played that role in their respective districts, but listen to many voices, and that's users, that's the IT side, that's the HR office that understands the restrictions on data use, and the external partners who can also benefit from what's in the system. Respect privacy protections, but keep pushing for the greatest amount of transparency that you can have consistent with protecting individual privacy. And then finally, start with some core users, and this goes back to settling on a high priority purpose. So start with people who really want to use this thing, and then expand to wider circles of users and work with them as you do that expansion. So that's some things that we learned about LTSs in a nutshell. And I will turn it back to Michelle.
Thanks a bunch, Brenda. That's a really helpful overview, and you've covered a lot of really critical ground. I think what we'll do is we'll circle back around with questions that get into more specifics concerning these LTSs. But first, let's turn to the profile districts and get a firsthand account of their experiences in building and sustaining their tracking systems, and maybe get them to think about some of the comments that you have made. So let's first turn to Damaris. Damaris, we'd like to know what you learned in Prince George's County as you were developing your tracking system. In reading the study in particular, we hope that you'll be able to address this particular question. We were struck by one of the innovations that you made in your district tracking system, and just thinking about what Brenda was just saying, we imagine that this probably wasn't one of the things you included in the beginning, but eventually, as you've built this out, you have included executive summaries of doctoral dissertations. We would love to hear you talk a little bit about your decision to include these executive summaries in your tracking system and the relationship that you developed with your university partners that enabled that in particular to happen. And then also, if you could say something more broadly about how you worked with your university partners to develop the tracking system and what you feel is one of the most positive developments for your district as a result. Damaris, are you?
Okay, here we go. I see it. Thank you, Michelle, for having me and on with everyone. And Brenda, that was a great overview. So I'm just going to jump right in to respond to some of the questions that Michelle sort of framed up for me. Again, as a district that was part of the Principal Pipeline Initiative, it was part of our grant that we build this LTS. But one of the things that we focused on going in was that we needed this LTS to not only be, you know, one of the things that we needed to fulfill the grant agreement, but we wanted it to be usable for us as a district. So one of the largest, I want to say one of the largest or the most impactful things for us was that we had to ask ourselves the key questions. What was this particular system going to do for us as a school district? And in answering that, we came up with some really key points. And we said it's going to be easy access to data points. And Brenda already shared about that. We wanted sort of like a comprehensive snapshot of leader profiles. We wanted something that would assist us with selection, hiring, succession, but also being able to support. So also being used as a support tool for those aspiring leaders who really are almost there and ready to move into their next positions, but in what ways could we look at where they are and help support them? And then we wanted to identify trends and patterns within our leadership development programs. And so that then brings in the piece with all of our university partners and some of our even organizational partners that were working with us to help develop our aspiring leaders. So those are some of the things that we had to ask ourselves before moving on and moving forward with the development of the LTS. But you asked about the doctoral piece. So at the same time that we had received the grant, we were also working with the Gates Foundation and a grant that we had received for them. And we were looking at how could we further develop folks that were already in principalships, people that were in central office. And hence we developed some partnerships with Howard University and the University of Maryland to develop a doctoral program. So we really took the expansion of our partnership that started with the PPI into another arena. And we knew we wanted to build the capacity of those folks, but we also wanted to focus on problems of practices. That means things that were unique to our school districts, things that we knew that we could bring back and actually utilize the data that was collected, the solutions that were made, and we were able to pull that in and actually use them within the district. But then we asked ourselves, well, where are we going to capture all of those great pieces of document data and the research that was done? And hence we said it would be a perfect fit to be placed into the LTS. So now in the LTS, from all of those folks who went through the doctoral program, their executive summaries are listed there. So if someone needed to figure out or wanted to go and do some more exploration on some particular challenges in the county, they could sort within our LTS around that particular problem, and they could get the executive summaries of we call them in-house experts on those particular things. So for example, if it was English language learners and we wanted to look at some ways that we could deal with those situations within our district, we could go to this one-stop shop, this leader tracking system, and be able to find out all of the folks who worked on their dissertations around ELL, special ed, math. We have a variety of different folks. So hence, that's how the doctoral dissertations became part of the leader tracking system and the actual taking a look at who in our districts are considered the experts around certain things. And then to answer another part of your question, how is this leader tracking system helped us in developing relationships or furthering our relationships with the university partners? I want to start with a little background history. When we first started with the Principal Pipeline Initiative and the Wallace grant, we had one partner. I mean, we had one university partner who was working with us on a regular basis. And so Dr. Anthony, who's the associate superintendent for the Office of Talent Development, he decided to bring in all of the universities who were willing to come and ask them what was the problem. What was it that we were not giving you and supporting you with that you would not want to partner with us? And hence we got a lot of answers, a lot of responses from that sort of very transparent conversation that he had with the universities who chose to attend that little focus group. And hence, one, it was a challenge. They told us to do research within our district. Two, it was sort of also, it was no reciprocal sharing of data. Once folks went through their university programs, whether it would be a master's program, whether it be just receiving their administration certification 1, there was no responding to where these folks were. There was no sharing of that information with the university partners. Most of our groups go in as cohorts. And there was no way of us telling them, here's who made it into an assistant principal's position, here's who's now a principal, or who's an instructional specialist. So with the leader tracking system in place now, we're able to give not very descriptive data, but we're able to give them some summarized data around where the cohorts are, who's doing what, how many of the folks have graduated from their programs and have moved into an assistant principal, or is now a mentor teacher, or is now an instructional specialist. This is a way for the university partners to sort of to gauge the effectiveness of their programs. So by us being able to track who graduated from where, it's also helping us to see what programs are graduating the most folks, who are moving through the leadership pipeline the quickest, and it's also helping us to inform the university partners about how well their programs are developing our folks by how many people are placed into leadership roles after they complete their programs. So I would say that it's a mutually beneficial system. It helps us to kind of track everyone and helps us to share that information with our university partnership. So in hindsight, really strengthening our relationship. And the good news is, so we went from one university partner to about 25 and counting now. So the word spread very quickly, and we have really gone above and beyond our initial goal of just getting 4 or 5 core partnerships to the point now we are on 25 and moving forward. So I hope I answered all of your questions, but feel free to ask any more, Michelle.
Yeah, yep, you sure did. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. I am curious to know, what are some of the most common questions that universities are hoping that you will help them answer with your tracking system data? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes. So again, we've had a focus group with our university partners. We host a university convening twice a year, a fall and a spring. We just had our Greater Impact Conference this past March, which we invited all of our university partners and others to attend. So one of the major things that they ask about is they want to know how impactful their program has been on the development of that particular aspiring leader. And again, being able to tell them, quantitatively how many folks who graduated from this cohort is now in some sort of leadership position, that is one of the key pieces of data that they're looking for. And then on the flip side, if there are low numbers, what is it that's holding some of those individuals back from moving into the leadership program? What is it that we feel as a district that they don't yet have in place that would then qualify them to be put into a leadership position? So just asking that, they really are looking for those sort of quantitative and qualitative data sets around the skills of the individual and how many of them have moved on. Because if someone is still sitting on the bench after 3 or 4 years of completing program, I think that is going to be helpful to the university partner to tell them a little bit about that person and what it is that person could be missing. And I know there's a lot of security issues with, revealing. And again, we won't be telling names. We'll be giving more or less group information, cohort 1, because that's how we sort of identified our groups, cohort 1, cohort 2, cohort 3, and therefore then we could talk about those individuals in groups and give them an overall insight into their leadership skill sets after the program and where they are currently in the district. So I would say those are the 2 major pieces of data that we've shared with universities and that universities have asked us to share with them.
Yeah, that's terrific. I can imagine that can be really useful to them. All right, let's now turn to Tricia McManus from Hillsborough County. Tricia, you have offered some longstanding leadership for Hillsborough County and really spearheaded the development of a leadership tracking system there. In reading the study, we were particularly interested in how you use data from your tracking system to address a particular problem in Hillsborough concerning equity. As I understand it, data from Hillsborough showed a significant lack of diversity among the county's educational leaders. And once you identified that using your tracking system, you began working with your university partners to encourage teachers of color to pursue leadership preparation. That seems like a really powerful use of the leadership tracking system. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on this a little bit, as well as speak more generally, like Damaris did, about your leadership tracking system and how it's been a positive force in your district.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So I'll start with the issue of diversity and equity within our system. So our leader tracking system houses a lot of data about our candidates, both when they're aspiring leaders in our system as soon as they enter the pipeline, and then as they progress through the pipeline. So it also includes information about current administrators. And I will tell you, we have a lot of components that are about diversity. So we have ethnicity captured and we have gender captured. We have different experiences captured and different certifications captured. So when we talk about diversity, for the purpose of this example, I will talk about ethnic diversity, but I do want to also say that the tool has also uncovered when we've needed someone with an exceptional education background, that maybe they're going to be leading in a center or in a school that has high number of students with exceptionality, or even a school that has high number of students that are second language learners. Our tool captures those experiences, and so we're able to find, do we even have folks with these backgrounds? And if not, what are we doing about recruiting? And so specifically when it comes to ethnic or racial diversity, our tool, we are able to sort on that. And it is very important in Hillsborough as the 8th largest district in the country and as a very diverse district when it comes to our student population. It's very important to us that we also have leadership that is representative of our student population. Since we also pull from the ranks of teachers in our pipeline, we're a very homegrown system. This has also helped with looking into our teacher pool out there to start to increase our recruitment efforts. So yes, we share with our universities a lot of information about the candidates that are getting into the pipeline, because once they leave the Ed Leadership program, they enter our program at the Future Leader Academy, so the aspiring assistant principal pool. And so we share demographic data about the candidates, but we've also, that data has completely supported an innovative recruitment strategy. Before, we would just go to the masses. And now we do very specific things at our teacher level with folks trying to encourage them to go back to schools. And then we've designed recruitment back to school for their Ed Leadership, since that's the first component of our pipeline. The first requirement in Florida is that level 1 prep program, which is Ed Leadership. But we've designed recruitment fairs with each of our university partners. We have 6 of them. And we have targeted specific groups. We've targeted our teachers of color for several of our recruitment fairs in hopes of increasing our number. And I will tell you, it's working. There are folks that may not have thought, is this something I want to do? They get this specific email or this specific invite. We've done it both ways. We've sent specific invitations, handed them to principals and asked them to help us with our recruitment effort. We've done specific emails to different groups of folks. But we have had a major increase in leaders of color entering the pipeline as a result of these efforts. So that's been a plus of the tool, is being able to break it down. We had to hire for a couple of our exceptional ed centers, and we really wanted folks that had certification in ESE. And so we used our tool to figure out, okay, which of our leaders have ESE certification? We use the tool. These are the folks that do. We can actually recruit from those pools. So it's been huge for recruitment and really targeting our recruitment efforts. I will say, as far as the tracking system being a positive force for the district, when we designed it 6 years ago, because we started the design right away, and we designed it with the lens of, we want to improve our hiring practices in Hillsborough. We want to have data-driven decisions. We want to place leaders in the best fit vacancies where their leadership strengths will be able to support the improvements in a school. And so the tracking tool has been a huge part of our succession planning efforts. The data we have about each of our candidates not only supports what I said earlier about their experiences and their certifications, but also about it gives us information about their competencies and where their strengths are and where they might have areas of growth in related to our 5 core competencies. And so our success, it has completely transformed the way we do our succession planning in Hillsborough, the way we hire, the way we fit leaders to the right vacancies. And that was the initial intent of it. You know, little did we know as we would go through the creation that it would also help us inform recruitment efforts, future recruitment efforts. It helps us inform professional learning needs of our leaders, and it also helps us inform program and programmatic effectiveness and impact. It's already been said from Prince George's how they've used it to help give information back to the university partners. We've done that identical thing. We have convenings every year, several convenings where we're giving data to our university partners, and we are assessing the impact of each of those programs. And so, yeah, it's been a huge, the leader tracking system has been huge in Hillsborough as far as just helping us make better informed decisions about how to effectively recruit, hire, develop, and evaluate our leaders.
Thanks a bunch, Tricia. Your experience there at Hillsborough and Damaris's in Prince George's County really help us, I think, illustrate the potential of the leadership tracking system. So I appreciate those examples. Now, this discussion has prompted a few key questions, some from our audience, and we've had several questions that are raising curiosity about the common challenges that districts are experiencing when developing their leadership tracking systems. And in particular, we had a question about challenges with regard to sharing personnel data with universities, but I'm sure that there are probably some other challenges that you came across in your research. Brenda, could you talk about some of those as well as the kind of the key lessons learned from the profile districts?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, the restrictions on data sharing are real, as we've all mentioned. There are issues for universities in sharing individual level data with school districts. There are issues for school districts as employers in sharing detailed data about on-the-job performance with any outside entity, including universities. So as Damaris and Tricia have said, the way to deal with that is to look at groups, the graduating cohort of such and such a year, or if it's a small program, maybe you combine a couple of cohorts or 2 or 3 cohorts so that it's possible to provide information about patterns, but without turning over personally identifiable data to another organization. So the districts have and partners have been very mindful of what they can and can't properly do with individual data, but nevertheless, there's been tremendous learning opportunities around data on leaders and aspiring leaders at the level of a group. So that's been a problem and a solution in progress, I think, over time. That as you've been hearing, the partners have really been more and more creative about thinking about what reasonably can be shared back and forth in ways that don't violate any privacy issues at all. Other challenges that have really loomed, and some of this is the kind of hard-won lessons that we do try to share in the report. Taking on too much, trying to be all things to all people. You heard both Damaris and Tricia talk about what they tried to focus on right at the beginning, and that is key. We definitely saw some instances in which districts regretted that they took a broad brush approach initially that required them to pull in massive amounts of data. And with each new data element, you face challenges of defining that data element. For example, something like master teachers, lead teachers, instructional coaches may be defined somewhat informally across the district and may not be flagged in a uniform way in the existing HR data set. And that requires a tremendous amount of work to sort through to get a good definition that's meaningful for all the purposes, and then really adhere to that definition going forward. So that's one example. Some of the districts certainly found that they didn't know where a lot of their principals or aspiring principals had initially attended university. I mean, they might know it, it might have been on the resume, but it might have been a little unclear as to where the preparation actually, the preparation that qualified them for their certification had actually come from. Therefore, they surveyed their principals in order to fill in that data retrospectively. So a lot of the challenges are just a hard slog through a whole lot of work. As you're hearing, I think the judgment in retrospect is that has been worth it. But that also reflects the fact that Prince George's County and Hillsborough County were quite clear on what they most wanted to be able to do with their data. And that has really helped them feel that the pain and suffering that they did go through paid off in ways that mattered to the district.
And just for clarification, Brenda, when you say adhering to a definition, you are talking about being able to consistently contribute the same type of data, the reliability.
Right. It's what you, yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's what you put into the system. If you want to indicate that somebody has a particular background with exceptional education, as Tricia mentioned, what do you have uniform titles for the positions that they've held, for the certifications that they hold, and the background learning opportunities that they've had? Or are you sort of, again, it's this, the value of an apples to apples comparison is huge. One of the points that everyone makes is this is so much better than resumes, because on a resume, as we all know, people use their own wording. People are being honest. I'm not talking about dishonesty on their resumes, but just people will not have a uniform way of describing and defining the experiences that they have had. And so a district needs to kind of track down that information for the individuals, and going forward needs to make sure that the classifications of positions and leadership opportunities and clinical experience during preparation and all of those kinds of things are described with uniform terminology, so that somebody who's using the system can really know what they're looking at as a piece of information about a candidate or about a group of aspiring leaders on the bench.
Nice, nice. You know, and I suppose some people might also, who are listening, be concerned that this data systems like this can also, you know, decontextualize people from their experiences and so forth. But I thought it was really interesting that one of the points that you all were very clear about on page 8 was that the data system only contributes to the types of decisions that are made around like hiring and placement and that sort of thing, that it doesn't drive the process. It contributes to it, it supports it in a really powerful way, but the decisions are not made kind of in a vacuum.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad you made that point. It's certainly not a process where you just, push a button on the machine and out pops your next principal for a vacancy. Nothing like that. What it does really is that it helps a district kind of surface who's a potential candidate based on the experiences that individuals have had. And we've absolutely heard from the districts that really helps them broaden their lens. It's not, the districts have been careful not to use the system to limit opportunities, to rule somebody out too quickly. It's much more to cast an appropriately wide net. And as Damaris was saying about finding who are our resources within the district, whose doctoral dissertation gives some insights into a challenge that we're facing as a district. That's a great example of making sure you don't overlook the resources that you actually have within your district, and based on the kinds of scholarly experience that people had in the university with the university partners.
Well, can I add to that about the looking at the data that's produced with the system? One thing we don't do, so like with our university partners, yes, we are going to let them know these are the folks that have graduated the program and are now have been accepted into Future Leader Academy, and then now this is the number that have gone on to get into assistant principal roles, and this is what their performance is saying as a whole. We do let them know, the people, but there's something very important about all of this data that needs to be remembered, and that is that in each district, depending on who you're working with, number one, we can't penalize an organization. So if you are producing too many candidates, then vacancies you're going to actually have. That's something that districts have to look at. So if we're having 500 people graduate from universities, and we are only going to have a need for 50 vacancies coming up in the next year or 2 or 3, you can't penalize a program for that. And so part of the I think the promise of a tool like this is to say we may not need as many, so let's make sure that we're making informed decisions at the beginning, that we can communicate to universities. Hey, listen, this is how many vacancies we're projecting coming up. So that's one thing. The other thing is, as far as evaluation data, it's very important to know that it's after someone graduates a program, they could go through 3 other programs. District context is huge. Are they getting a coach? Are they getting a mentor? Are they working in conditions that are promising? We can't penalize a university if we graduate folks and 3 years later when they become a principal, there's no condition in place for on-the-job support or for any other pre-service training. So I hope that makes sense, but we have to make sure that we understand context and that our decisions are being made are actually accurate decisions and not penalizing folks for things that are out of their control, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Damaris, anything to add to that?
Well, I was going to add to what Tricia said was not only do we, use it for that particular purpose as well, so I totally agree with her, we also take a look at, bottom line, looking at our teacher leaders who are not yet in the actual leadership pool. And if they are, because we're capturing, as Brenda said, mentor teachers, folks that are instructional lead teachers in schools and so forth and so on. And we're actually tapping into them and to give them some additional experiences outside of their school building to go ahead and build capacity. So we're utilizing these folks in various areas and developmental things that we do within the district to build their capacity after they're completed their university program. So it's like almost a wraparound support, and the LTS has allowed us to do that because as Tricia mentioned, there's sometimes not to any fault of anyone, you have to sit on that bench for 3 or 4 years. And how do you continuously engage those individuals who are ready, but yet there's not a slot for them to move into? So having a place like the LTS to be able to go and look by university grouping of where they came out of, because we have 4 different areas of focus in our leadership development program. So if I'm looking for someone who graduated from my University of Maryland STEM Admit 1 to work with the STEM supervisor on some projects, I can go into the LTS, go through that database, look for University of Maryland, and see who's just recently graduated or who's not yet into a leadership position, and ask that person if they want to join that particular committee or group to help. So it really is a beneficial tool, not just for selecting to place in positions, but to continuously develop individuals who have completed programs for my university partners. So I think it's twofold.
That's terrific. Yeah. You know, you have both, and Brenda also kind of alluded to this, the insight that this provides you to the preparation that people are bringing with them. But how well do you feel like the LTS helps you identify strengths and weaknesses within the candidate training of your partner universities? And if you do kind of feel like you do have a sense of that, how do you go about exchanging this information with your university partners? What does that look like?
We have done that. So once our folks become assistant principals, they're also evaluated on the same 5 core leadership competencies that they were selected on in the first place. And so in our university convenings, we have about 2 a year. That is outside of individual meetings with our university partners, but we do bring them all to the table, and we give them the data for their own graduates, and we start with this data. Folks that have gotten into our pipeline, on the day that they interview and through all of their application process, we are capturing competency-based data. So we are able to feed back data at the entrance. Hey, you have 6 candidates that entered that actually were accepted into our pipeline, and of those 6, you know, the strongest competency area was achievement, focus, and results orientation, an area that we would like you to focus on for growth in the future because of just the data that we collected is on the use of data or problem solving and strategic change management. So we give that data at that point. Then what we do is we track the data after a person then becomes an assistant principal, and now we have evaluation data on the same competencies. We then feed back to each of the partners general information too, just so that they know when we go back. There was a year we gave out data to universities that really showed that whole relational piece on EQ, pretty much, that is an area that we need to grow in our leaders, that they have been so focused on instruction and that the relational piece was an issue. So in our convening, we gave that data back to them and basically had them talk about how is that incorporated in their coursework, how is that incorporated in their practicum experiences, and what could they do to strengthen it. And we do that every year, looking at the next cohort that's entered into the pipeline.
And as well as what Tricia mentioned, we started something within the past couple of 3 years where we had the universities partner with us in developing the what should I say, the internship. Some people call it a practicum and the externship. And so it really has been a collaborative approach to ensure that we're actually strengthening the leadership skills of those individuals in the program based on our core competencies. We do have leadership standards in the county. So we make sure that we're structuring those practicums with the universities to make sure that the practicum is addressing the individual competencies that we're focusing on. We've done a better job of engaging the principal in conversation with the university partners. So where those students are being placed with their practicums, there's also this triad of conversation between the university point of contact, the principal who will be actually managing the day-to-day of that practicum participant in the schoolhouse. So we've kind of made sure that we've sort of wrapped around that individual some constant conversation and some really intentional supports aligned with the competencies that we have put in place within the school district. And I can say honestly, we weren't doing that, probably 4 or 5, 6 years ago. But I think the LTS has brought us to a point where we've been, we saw that we needed to communicate more with the universities about what's the structure of those practicum and externship experiences. So those are some other things that I think that we have done. And I wanted to just go back real quick. I think somebody mentioned about the whole LTS being this, it could be seen as this dehumanization of LTS system, just not seeing a person. And one of the things that we've incorporated is pictures. So now you have a picture of each individual on their profile page. We have an opportunity to put their PD development. So from the time they've been a teacher in the system, we've done our best to go way back and capture all of the professional development that they've ever experienced within the district, as far as we could go back. So we put some, some humanistic type of things to it. So you're just not looking at a piece of paper with some data points. There's some things to relate to that person. We use strength finders in the district. So we also list that person's top 5 strengths on their profile page. So if they're achiever, if they're harmony, it really does, again, speak to how you can turn this technical system into something that just doesn't become this, you're looking at a screen to learn about an individual. We have added some humanistic points to the profile page that we feel has been helpful for individuals.
And Damaris, at the district, in your district, who has access to the LTS? Do principals have access to their own page, or is this, is it your unit, or how does that work?
So you're absolutely right. We started off holding it very close to the chest, again, because we were working on all the security elements, and that's a huge factor for a system like this. How do you keep it secure? Because there's a lot of some confidential data in there. And so you're absolutely right. We started off with just some core people in the Office of Talent Development, some core people in HR, of course, some people on our tech team. And then we started to build it out by having focus group sessions, first with our principal supervisors, and getting feedback from them on how they thought this was going to be, how they thought this should be shared, and who should have experience to it. And then we, again, broadened it, and we introduced it to our principals. And yes, the plan is to have all principals be able to access it, assistant principals to be able to access it and look at their individual pages as well. So we really have been very intentional about the managed rollout of this. Again, sometimes a tool like this can be mismanaged or perceived to be utilized in a different way than what it was intended. So by us managing the rollout and messaging it correctly, we really feel that it's given us a better experience with the tool and the actual end users that are going to be engaging with the tool.
So Damaris, you and also to you, Tricia, do you feel like everybody who you've engaged with the LTS feels like this is a win-win, that they feel like this is a good thing, or do you have any folks that are still kind of on the fence or not so sure this is a great idea?
No, ours has been very positive because people have seen a change in hiring practices, which it has been really a strength for Hillsborough. Our principals do have access, and they have access to their own page and access to the candidate pool, so that as they're hiring assistant principals, they see that data. So it's been a huge win-win, both for our principals, district staff, principal supervisors, as well as our university partners.
I agree with Tricia. It's been it's been received quite positively. And I'm going to say the key to that is making sure you have all of the right people at the table at the beginning of the developmental process. We didn't just want this to be something that we utilize. We wanted others to feel that it would be of value to them in their roles in the different departments in the district. So yeah, HR was at the table at the very beginning. Again, the principal supervisors were at the table at the very beginning of this development. Again, HR, all of those people were at the table, and I think that really has build the conversation around how this can be used throughout the district. We always joke that once, you know, wherever we go or, you know, down the road, this particular system is a legacy. It's going to stay here and it's going to bring benefits to the district long before we, you know, after we've gone on. So we really have taken our time to make sure that it's beneficial to all in the district.
Thank you. I'm just stunned that it's already 4:30 and we're coming towards the end, or actually we're extending beyond the end of our webinar. But I do want to give a chance for all three of you to make any final comments or you know, any thoughts that you didn't get to share before we come to an end today. Brenda, anything from you?
No, I think that's been terrific, and thanks.
Yeah, Damaris or Tricia?
No, I think it's been covered, and if anyone has any questions as you're designing yours, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, a big shout out to the wonderful questions that came in on our question box. Really appreciated the different comments and questions that came in. And if we did not get to your questions, we will make sure and email them to our presenters today. I'd like to thank all of our guests once again. Thank you, Brenda, Damaris, and Tricia, for sharing your insights and your time with us. We know it's all very valuable. I'd also like to thank all of those of you who attended today and remind you that a full recording of this discussion will be available within a few days on the UCA website. And we encourage you to share it with your colleagues, as well as to download the reports, read them, and share them with your colleagues. Also, finally, a big thank you to the Wallace Foundation for supporting our webinar today. And I wish all of you a very pleasant week. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle.